Good afternoon. My name is Jason Beach. I'm the district service manager out of the Tampa operation, and I will attempt to kind of walk through the various features of the work order solution that's currently being utilized throughout the Southeast region and underneath all of Russ Desolate's service centers. So what I've done is I've kind of broken this down into various sections for simplicity. I've kind of allowed time marks where you can kind of forward through and just kind of jump to a section that's pertinent to you and your interest. But what I'll do is I'll kind of walk through initially here, just kind of do a login, show what the workspace essentially looks like, what the menu navigation, how that's set up, and then we'll kind of break it down and do a deeper dive into each kind of subcategory, if you will. So here we are on the home page of WorkOrders.com. Again, for those of you that don't know, the developer was Greg Brainerd. He's also the brains, along with Russ, behind Scaleforms. So in any case, a lot of the menus and kind of the feel and the interface is real similar to what you experience with Scaleforms. So let's go ahead and get logged in here. I guess it kind of skipped the log out or the login process. It already had saved my credentials. But nonetheless, once you do type in your user profile and your password, this is kind of the default page that you're launched into, which provides some sort of dashboard, which again, I mean, this is similar to what you see through Scaleforms. And so what it does is it allows some sort of financial roll-up in terms of the number of quotes that we've sold in a certain time interval, and it provides all this kind of in a virtual dashboard bar graph as the quotes typically come in throughout a set time period. So real quick, we'll just kind of do a brief menu structure. Accounts, it's typically where we're going to add our companies, our different ship-to locations, and our specific point of contacts for each account. As we're moving from the left to the right, on top here we go to equipment parts, which essentially are all parts that we have the ability to sell within the solution. Currently, I think long-term vision is to have this kind of backflushed in some sort of routine time intervals, simply because we can get the full array of parts available to the field. And secondly, and probably more importantly, we can get accurate pricing as well. Service is an area that allows us to enter things like truck charges, supplies and materials, crane charges, additional outside services that aren't a tangible hard good. Quoting, this is kind of the mainstay of the solution, where you pretty much spend the vast amount of time as far as from a management level understanding and having a vision to the number of quotes that have been created and what the status is of each of these quotes. So again, numerous features throughout this pull down menu. Reports, again, we'll do a deeper dive on each one of these subcategories, but again, some of these have been kind of pre-baked reports where we can kind of identify, how many quotes are sold within a certain time interval. We have the ability now to look at the quotes activity by service center, so we can see the number of quotes that have been created, how many have been sold, and so again, it's a lot of great feedback probably for the regional director level and above. Quoted parts. Again, I think this kind of can probably play into understanding some of the parts rather that have been frequently quoted. Probably help determine some of the failure rates, things like load cells and things of the sort. Forms, I think this is something that's still kind of in its beta testing phase. I think Russ had some vision on some of this. I know ultimately we will have the ability to can some forms, whether it's a purchase order or any other sort of information that we want to capture. Again, I think a lot of the infrastructure and how this is built and designed is synonymous with what you'll see through Scaleforms. And then lastly, the last pull-down menu is ultimately going to provide the barrage of settings that ultimately are going to set up the framework in which all of WorkOrders will run off of, in terms of setting up various rates, part categories, quote categories. We can determine our rates, which are typically specific to each service center. We then have the ability to create customized email templates. Again, those can be somewhat specific to each service center, or we can certainly make those more of a global type template. So again, this is kind of some of the settings. So from here, we will dig into the next section. All right, we will move to the next section, which kind of shows how we add an additional office and how we add additional users. So we're going to go down to the settings menu, slide down, and we're going to go to offices. You'll currently see, I think we've got 8 shops currently on work orders. So it's just pretty cut and dry, pretty straightforward. Information to add the address, essentially add the service center number. In this case, ours is 214 in Tampa. So that's pretty cut and dry. Let's move over to the users. And again, this is just kind of a queue of all the active users we have today within work orders. So again, if we were wanting to set up a new shop today, we've just went to the previous screen and entered a new service center. Now we simply navigate to this screen and add additional users. First, last name, email, password. Once the office is created, you'll then find it here in the pull-down menu. You can set up a certain rate category that's specific to each user. And then ultimately you can determine, is he a technician or what kind of job title that he has. And we can go ahead and create the user. The other thing that's interesting of note, we'll kind of open this up, is that when you expand on each user, you have the ability to set site permissions. And so one nice thing of the work order solution is that ultimately there's 3 site permission levels. There's a site manager, which is reserved for somebody that's probably has a pretty good understanding of the entire program and how it's implemented, and the ability to create things like categories, terms and conditions, disclaimers, some of the more high-level things that you don't want everybody ultimately being exposed to. The second thing will be the office manager. Again, the big differentiator there is the office manager tag will allow whomever that user is to have full visibility for all quotes in that service center. So in the framework of the Southeast, we have field service managers, and so they're typically coined as office managers within work orders. And again, they have visibility into all the quotes that are active, which is really nice. The last user profile will be the user, and again, that's just typically for standard technicians. They're essentially limited in terms of some of their read-write capabilities. They're not able to load new parts and load new customer information, but provided the customer and the parts is already in the active database, they can create quotes and send them upward to for approval. So this screen kind of shows that, and then ultimately you can see here you have numerous fields that you can identify and determine if you want them to be read or read-write settings based on if they're users or an office manager. Next, we'll move on to the account section of work orders. Again, that's on the far left side of the upper menu bar. And this will be ultimately an active directory of all the companies that we currently have loaded into work orders. Again, I know this is part of the wish list to have this communicate directly with PRMS and have all this information essentially back flushed in there and kind of eliminate some of the manual data entry that we're faced with currently. So that being said, again, this is just kind of an active log of companies. The nice thing is we have a little quick find field over here that's very useful. So we're going to go ahead and drill down into one of these companies, and we're going to look at WestRock. So in the event that our company wasn't there and we were looking to quote a service agreement for a customer, we had a technician out doing some solicitation efforts and identified an immediate opportunity, we would have to go through the long form process of creating a new company, in which you just kind of navigate through various fields. In the event that we're quoting an active customer that we've quoted in the past, typically we go through here and just make sure that the ship to locations have been properly added, and probably most importantly that the correct point of contact employee information is in the system, specifically the email address. Once the quotes are submitted, We certainly want them to be, land in the right hands as opposed to just kind of laying dormant. So here's WestRock. We will open this up. And again, what you'll find through most of work orders is these numerous tabs up at the top. Once you kind of fan open with the caret here on the left, you then navigate through each of the tabs. And so what's important for us is to make sure that indeed we have the right ship to location is indeed, in this case, WestRock has multiple locations in Jacksonville, and we're looking to create a quote for the Eastport Road location, which just happens to be the site we're installing 2 scales on next week. So importantly, again, is to go through and move along the tabs on top and go into the employee section and make sure that your point of contact, whether that's a maintenance manager or somebody in the procurement department, is ultimately going to receive the email. So in this instance, Amanda Miller is in fact the correct person. So we're good there. And again, just to kind of confirm that the correct email address has been entered. We'll collapse that back up. There's some additional tabs that we haven't really tapped into as of yet. There's some ability to upload some files that are dependent and only relevant for that particular company. They could be things for like service agreement contracts. Ultimately, it could be some sort of vault for some sort of online documentations, drawings, anything that's pertinent. We really haven't tapped into that quite so much yet. So again, utilize this quick field. Will help you drill down into exactly what you're looking for. Type in Vulcan and you can see all the numerous sites being done here. And again, it's pretty much just intuitive as you would expect to add any sort of additional new data. Okay, the next section is equipment and parts. And currently we have 325 parts that have been loaded into the work orders database. Unfortunately, I think it is currently requiring manual entry, which requires essentially making sure we don't have any sort of typo errors, making sure that kind of the naming convention is followed throughout, and then ultimately making sure we get the right pricing updated into the system, which is essential. So again, I think long-term vision is to have some sort of periodic transfer of information in which the vault of parts available to the field and pricing is automatically updated into work orders. So again, just like the previous section, you have the quick field thing, which is really advantageous to quickly identify and make sure parts are in the website. So for instance, we will type in pit power, and as you start to auto type that, it's naturally filtering out the selection, and it's quickly coming up as pit power supply, giving you that option. Also too, this particular search field also picks up the column for part number, so if you knew the part number and wasn't sure exactly how they had it described, you'd be able to locate it as well. So in this instance, we're going to actually quote a pit power supply of 23393. We're going to confirm that 468, cross-reference that back with the website and confirm that $468 is the accurate and most updated pricing. So we'll wipe this field clear to get back to all 300 parts, and then we're going to add an additional part. We could give this a IntelliLogix add-on. You can give a further description. Ultimately, you can assign a select category, so all the parts kind of fall into various buckets, and then update your cost and your price. In addition, we have a drop-down field where we can identify if it's going to be a third-party part. We can identify who the vendor was. There's some provision here. Whoops. There's a provision here for the bay and aisle if it was an item that was typically found in a stockroom type location or environment. Also too, we can upload images. I'll show you one of those as well. We've updated various little bitmaps and PNG files, which actually transpose really nicely to the final quote product. In addition, I think we have the ability to provide a web link, which we've done that on numerous parts as well. I know we've done that for some of the instrumentation. That provides a URL that will launch right into Fairbanks website and allow the customer an opportunity to read the spec sheet or some additional information. So pretty straightforward here as well. I'll show the one with the image is 154625. And we edit this and you'll see a little 25-pound test weight. So again, it's nice that it's actually something that will be in the web view presentation to the quote once submitted to the customer. Okay, moving along, we will go into the services section and speak briefly about that. So again, it's much the same interface and how you would add additional equipment and parts. The same virtually applies for services, but this is kind of the section which all sorts of additional services, whether they're inside or kind of outside, this is where we utilize all of our truck charges internally. It gives us the ability to quote supplies and materials and make sure that's getting captured. So we have some sort of recovery aimed at against our supply charges each month. And then ultimately, this is where we would add additional crane charges, and if we have outside services like foundation work. So again, the nice thing is, for instance, if we look at the crane service, let's toggle this column alphabetically, crane, we're kind of able to add some of these images, which again kind of look nice when it's all finally presented, which we'll show that in the end. Foundation and construction, this would be a field that we could utilize. Construction crew, this is a line item that we would utilize if we're given a quote from an outside contractor, and then we ultimately present that to our internal sales managers. So again, much the same interface, add, and then just kind of walk through the various things. Again, we're trying to keep the categories of services relatively clean. Moving on, we will discuss rates and how we make adjustments to the various labor rates that each service center has the ability to create. So we will go over to the far right drop down under the user's name, go to settings, and then slide down to rates. And again, these are specific to each service center or to each office, I guess would be the correct term within WorkOrders. And so you can see the Tampa operation, you have the ability to create various rate codes dependent on if it's a contract customer versus a non-contract customer, and then over time double times, and then we have the flat rate provision as well, which we'll go into a little bit later. So ultimately, again, this you can kind of fan through each of the shops and look at what their various pricing strategies are in terms of the rates. So pretty cut and dry. Again, add. If you want to modify, you can come back through here and determine that, hey, our contract rate is going to be adjusted this year, and simply override the 125 and make the adjustment. Okay, moving on to attachments. We will go under the quoting menu, slide down to attachments. And this section ultimately allows us to store kind of online in the cloud through WorkOrders various marketing brochures and PDF files to help support and kind of promote our services. So you'll see here on this particular screen we've got various products that have already been loaded up. Certain instrumentation like the new 7100 series has been uploaded, FB4000. And so then as you go through the quote creation, which again will probably be the latter part of the video, you'll see the provision for us to attach various attachments prior to actually being submitted out of the queue. So also in addition, we've got numerous ones that support service. One that talks about the automated test reports, kind of our nationwide customized service. So I think, again, if we have an opportunity where we're presenting this to a brand new customer, I think it just kind of ratchets up the professionalism to kind of a whole another level. So again, I think this is a great feature that was added on early, and certainly is utilized and encouraged by the team to make sure we tap into this. The second part of the attachments is the ability to upload, go right to your file directory and upload images to help support the quote. So certainly in the event that we have some gap covers that have shown significant wear, we can attach some pictures that were taken in the field from a technician to kind of help support and validate that quote. So again, that's a nice feature. I know we've also had other requests for various spreadsheets that our folks within Fairbanks use to track certain inspections and things like that. And our customers are asking for an updated log of that. So with that feature, we now can just send one-off attachments as opposed to uploading them into this particular section as well. Now we'll actually go to the screen and do a quote. Ultimately, that's the core job of this solution, is to provide our quotes for us. So thus far, we've kind of walked through the various components to help build a quote. We've talked about labor rates. We've set up a new office. We've added additional users. We've shown how to add additional equipment and parts, how to provide or enter new services, and identify point of contact, ship to addresses for the company. So now that we've kind of validated all that information is there, it's time to proceed with the quote creation. So again, we're on the home page, kind of the dashboard. We will go to the quoting drop-down menu and hit quotes. And this kind of brings us to the quote log. Ultimately, kind of gives you visibility as to all the quotes that have been released or created through work orders. And these 4 fields up at the top are great because they ultimately allow you to kind of drill down into various criteria. The first field, in which is based on shops, you can look at all quotes for each of the shops, which is kind of nice. Or you can go to all offices. Again, you can kind of drill down if you want to look for a particular user. I want to see how many quotes David Taylor has created. This will allow us to do that. Okay, it takes a second, and all of a sudden it'll refresh. Okay, and so just kind of walking through this screen a little bit. The left caret here allows the quote details to be expanded on. Once we highlight the quote, the whole horizontal bar will go blue, and then we'll click on the left caret and we will open it up and allow us to kind of drill down into the contents within each quote. Okay, we'll collapse that back. And then again, kind of going left to right through the columns. The second column is the unique quote number identifier that's specific to each quote. You'll get a recap of the company, when the quote was actually created, what the category of each quote is. And again, those have been predetermined, and that's a force field when we actually create a quote, that they have to fall in, I think, one of 8 to 12 categories that have already been predetermined. Again, we have a brief description. Here's the salesperson column. Again, it kind of allows some trackability, and it's another measurable essentially to the technician's contribution to the shop. Progress, this is really important. We'll have a separate module just on kind of the progress column, and how that's a tool to let you know kind of the navigation or the journey of each quote in terms of, is it open, kind of in rough draft, has it been submitted, has it been viewed by your customers, and then ultimately the final question, and the most important thing is we want to know when it goes to the sold status. Ultimately, who the quote was created by. Some of our technicians in Tampa do have the ability to create quotes. And then we have the total reoccurring cost and one-time cost. A lot of the reoccurring column values will be 0, just simply because those are typically reserved for service agreements that have scheduled intervals, biannual or quarterly, monthly inspections. So also what's nice here, if we go back and open this field back up to all salespeople, the category allows us to kind of, I mentioned the 8 or 12 various categories, it allows us to kind of drill down into all shops that have quoted lubrication service. And again, I think one of the features here is you can kind of competitively look, or not necessarily competitively, but you can kind of gain an understanding as to how other shops quote and how they build that, and what their ingredients are, and how aggressive they may get with their pricing. And I think that's been beneficial because we've noticed some shortfalls in that category where we've quoted just significantly light. So again, you can kind of drill this down. In this case, we want to look for just all installations. And again, all 4 of these fields are just all filtering mechanisms, as you can see. So we'll open all these back up, and we'll just go to the Tampa office, and we'll actually walk through a brand new quote creation. Okay, so the client, we're going to use Westrock. Again, we, I think, used them earlier, so we'll stay with that theme. Again, the salesperson, we will use David Taylor. Again, he's the technician we'll pick on in this example. Template, we won't use a template in this instance. It's kind of still in the beta testing phases, but ultimately the templates are going to allow us to do is pre-bake or pre-make, if you will, various quotes that are already going to have the certain services already included. So it's a real quick, more plug-and-play type approach, as opposed to the technicians needing to kind of capture all the various moving parts of a quote. So more on that later. Location, it's the Eastport Road location. The contact, again, I went back in here and added my name as if I was an employee of WestRock, just simply because I want the quote to be sent to me. A category, this is a mandated field. Again, we're trying to have every quote land in one of these buckets. And because of that, we're allowed, or one of the filtering mechanisms, the fields up above, drills you down by category. So again, this is real beneficial. So in this instance, we are going to do, let's just say, an installation. We're going to install an instrument. Okay? So we're going to do FB2560. Instrument upgrade, and terms and conditions, we're going to use the Fairbanks product terms, the disclaimer, freight and tax extra. Notes and comments, you can be a little more descriptive, nothing necessary here. Reminder rule set, again, that's something else we'll preserve to a later module. Okay. So now once I hit create, it then finds itself in the active queue. It's the top quote here. It's quote number 9029. You can see it was created today, April 9th. The category is installation, description, salesperson David Taylor. The status, it's currently open, which means nothing's been submitted to the customer. It remains in the rough draft status, and it was created by myself. So we open the left caret, and you're going to see the 6 tabs on the top bar here that's going to allow us to build this quote. So again, we're going to quickly just add some fictitious stuff in here as we kind of navigate along. So they are a contract customer, travel labor. Our travel rates currently are $125 an hour, and it's an hour and a half each way, so we're going to give that a quantity of 3. The extended cost becomes $375. Travel labor is fairly descriptive enough, probably don't need anything additional. We anticipate regular labor contract. We anticipate 2 hours on site to do the switch out of the instrument. So we're going to create that as well. Equipment and parts. We're going to add FB2560 and so this is the DAT. Again, there's further description that was added on the equipment parts tab, $52.95. We've already confirmed that that pricing is accurate. We're going to go to services. We need to make sure that we get our truck charge in there. Class 4 truck charge. We've already went to the truck rate sheet for 2020 and confirmed it's $228. We're also going to capture supplies. And we're just going to put a random number in there. It's a little more scientific in terms of how we compute that. But again, we're just quickly kind of building the criteria or the various components of a quote. So we talked earlier about attachments. This is now the opportunity for us to tag a product attachment on the 2560. So it's going to be, a nice, marketing kind of material to support some of the feature set for the 2560. So we will make sure this gets added, and that's evident with the little PDF logo here on the left. So now just to kind of walk back through briefly, we've added our labor. We've got 2 hours on site. We've got 3 hours of travel time at the 125 contract rate. Total all-in labor piece is $625. Equipment parts. We've got the 2560 data terminal for $52.95. Services, we have a class 4 truck, supplies and materials. We've added an attachment to help promote the upgrade to the 2560, and then lastly we come to the totals. And so all in, the customer was responsible for $62.23 plus freight and tax being extra. But ultimately, it's real important now, these 5 buttons here at the bottom. This would give us the ability, if we were to type in a discount right here, say we want to give them a 10% discount for whatever reason, we could then hit the apply discount and you would see that applied to the total immediately. But the review quote is important because when we click this button, we're then going to launch a new tab within the browser. And that ultimately is what the customer is going to see when they're presented, the quote via email. They're going to have an email that's going to have some sort of introductory verbiage to the effect of, here's your service quote from Fairbanks, and they're going to have a link that they're going to launch, and then they are going to be presented with this. Okay, so again, just to kind of recap, this is what they're going to see, and at this time, the customer will have the ability to download the PDF if they would rather deal with the information in that manner. This is what we kind of coined this as our web view version of the quotes. And so you can kind of see the 3 hours travel, the 2 hours regular. Here's our parts that we've quoted, the 2560 data terminal. We've got our truck charge, and then we got supplies and materials, and we got our total price of $62.23. So how it typically works, I don't want to hit approve quote just yet, because if I were to approve it now, it's going to go directly to the customer. But field service managers, resident tech, shop technicians that are in the quoting process within WorkOrders currently for both the Tampa and Savannah operation, once they hit submit, it then sends immediately routes over to me and basically notifies me that there's a quote that's waiting for me to review it and provide final submittal. And it's only then, once it kind of passes through me after my review, then it ultimately will pass on to the customer. But what that does do is it provides an additional kind of stopgap to determine that, hey, we've captured everything, we've thought everything through, especially when we start dealing with outside services, making sure we got our proper margins and things like that are baked in. So we go back here, say we have identified that everything is indeed correct and we feel like it's ready to submit the quote. We will hit submit quote. Again, it's a little deceiving because my name's at the top, but again, I made myself an employee of WestRock in this instance. Email template. So this is another nice feature. It allows each service center the ability to create a separate kind of canned message. And again, we can, consider the opportunity to make that a global thing, but right now it's kind of a locally driven thing based on each service center. But again, it's kind of an introductory, hey, this is what Fairbanks service can do for you. And so we're going to go ahead and select that as Tampa quotes. And in the subject line of the incoming email, they'll receive Fairbanks Scales service quote. And then also, in addition, on the subject line, they're going to get the description that we provided earlier on, which I believe was the installation of the FB 2560 will also marry up to that subject field. If there's any additional attachments, this was the second component of the attachment piece. Some of them kind of live on the WorkOrders cloud, if you will, but in the event that we wanted to attach a photo or a spreadsheet or a document that's relevant to just that customer and we don't want it visible for all the technicians within WorkOrders, this would be the opportunity to do so. Once we feel good about everything, we go ahead and hit submit. We can collapse the quote, refresh the browser, and you will see that it's changed its status to submitted. Very important. Again, anything that's kind of open is currently in the rough draft. Sometimes we have additional information we're getting from Solutions Group potentially. We have other information in terms of not really knowing the quantity of remote displays, for instance, and so we're holding off until we get that last piece before we submit it. So real critical here, it's in the submitted progress. Once the customer has viewed it, this is going to spawn an email to the customer. Once they click that link, one of the best features of this entire program is the actual quote will then change to this kind of amber orange color showing that it's been viewed. Which again, that is just, it's an outstanding feature because you know that they've put their eyes on it, and it then allows probably a short duration to pass and allows the opportunity for a manager or a technician to follow up with the customer and confirm that they have indeed opened the quote. Is there any additional pricing, anything that we can kind of clear up or any concerns they may have. Okay, so what I've done here is I've taken a screenshot of what exactly the email will look like on the customer's behalf once they receive it. So again, this is a different computer. I don't have Outlook on this computer, so I was only kind of forced to take a screenshot so you guys can see exactly what it is. So we'll kind of walk through the various components of this. First, you recognize that the attachment has successfully been sent. That was the attachment that we sent supporting the 2560 series instrument getting installed. We also have some sort of canned message that we present to the customer. And again, it says, "Hello, Jason," simply because I was the recipient, I was the employee of WestRock. So when we look at the 4 recipients up here in the email thread, myself, my name is on here first and foremost because I created the quote. Secondly, David Taylor was the technician that provided the lead, so his name will be on it to provide ultimately confirmation that indeed the quote has been successfully submitted to his customer. Third, I'm the manager of the operation, so I will be privy to all quotes and be in that communication thread. And then lastly, my name appears a third time rather, simply because I'm an employee of WestRock in this instance. So again, you have whoever created the quote. Secondly, you have the technician's name that will be assigned or given credit for the quote lead. Thirdly, the manager of the operation. And then lastly, of course, would be the customer's name. So again, we have the attachment, the canned message, which again, this is created or customized for each operation. Again, we can make that a local or a global setting. And then they're forced to ultimately click the view quote here hyperlink, at which time it'll take you into the web view, which we've shown earlier. And then from there, they can kind of download the PDF. Also, going back into the quotes here, just real briefly want to talk about again, I really believe this is probably one of the big differentiators between this solution and having other kind of quoting solutions, if you will, is the fact that this visibility and how successful and helpful this has been. And again, that the previous slide, as we segued into this little video module, it kind of shows you the different steps, if you will. Again, just to kind of reiterate, the open is kind of a rough draft. It's kind of in the draft status for, again, various reasons. So we go from blue. We then go to submitted, which again, these are then submitted to the manager and they're awaiting approval. In this particular instance, there's a conversation that I'd like to have before we get these submitted to the customer, at which time they then transfer over to the purple status, which is delivered to the customer. Okay, so now that we've submitted this quote 9029, the FB 2560 instrument upgrade, I have then opened up this tab and begin to review the quote. So as we refresh this log, we should then see the status change to the amber color, designating that the quote has been viewed, right? So you saw it shift from delivered to viewed, which is critical because I had just opened up this tab as if I were Jason Beach, an active employee with WestRock. So this is what they're going to be presented with as the web view. They have an opportunity to kind of validate pricing. They feel like the pricing structure and what they're being obligated to pay for is to their liking. And now they actually want to release a purchase order. This is how they would go about submitting that. They hit the checkbox that I have reviewed the quote and accept the proposal, pricing, terms, and condition. PO number WR-3445-L. If we had an attachment, we can go to our directory and tag a file. My name is Jason Beach. And then we're going to sign this thing away. And we're going to hit accept the quote. Order's been accepted. So ultimately that's going to be what triggers the shift, the final shift in the status of the quote to the sold status, which should go green. So if we refresh this for the first time since getting the sold status, we should see this toggle. And it did. So again, excellent. You've kind of got to see, the journey from quote creation to the submittal process, us being able to email or to tag an email template to that. Ultimately, for us to open that up, change it to the viewed status, and then we were able to apply a PO against that and a signature, and then we move the quote status to sold. And so again, like we talked about before, we can toggle the column here to simply go through all these quotes and look and see all the active quotes that have been sold. We can look for sold, and we can drill down by shop, by technician, and by what category. So I think that the filtering criteria is virtually endless on this particular screen. We'll also show the order screen here, which is just kind of exclusive for quotes that have been converted into orders. Again, pretty nice stuff here. Over here, you have two different options. The eyeball, if you were to click this, you have the option to launch back into the web view of the quote, or you can download the PDF. So if you click on this, you then can look at it in the PDF version. And we'll go back to the tab, show one more of those that may be a little bit more detailed. Let's click on one of those. And here's a calibration agreement. So again, this is the actual orders menu option as you scroll down here. And again, you can then look for and drill this down by each technician as well. One additional thing that's pretty neat, I think it's worthy to show when we talk about the orders, when we go into the settings and we go into users, we're going to type in David Taylor again because we're going to pick on him throughout the evening. David Taylor, and we're going to hit edit. And so what's nice here is you hit require PO manager. In this instance, once we get the order, they're going directly to Megan, which is our new administrator out of Buffalo. So really good stuff. You can actually put in multiple emails here. I think I had Joe Newcoop in there with the semicolon. So what that means is that the administrator now has the ability to get the orders instantly in their lap. They can start keying in parts if they got to enter a parts order through PRMS. So again, it has the ability to instantly send off directly to an administrator. You have the ability to look directly at a screen that's dedicated for orders alone, or you can go to the main quote log and use the filtering criteria to look at quotes sold. One other thing as it relates to orders, which is kind of convenient, is once you look at the active quote log, again, we'll kind of drill down and only look at the status of quotes that have been sold. And again, this is, I think, another beneficial tool for the administrator. So again, we're looking just solely at the Tampa quotes. And off to the side here, you have the eyeball where you have the little PDF emblem. I've already launched both of these. One is web view and one is the actual hard copy in PDF format. So here we have the PDF format of the order that we just processed tonight throughout this journey with the 5 hours of labor, 3 hours travel, 2 hours on site, the equipment, the class 4 truck charge, and the supplies. We can see we have the PO number WR-23445-L, and we have the customer's signature here at the bottom as well. And again, we can kind of upload this to metrics as a supporting document to each RID. Or also too, we have the web view where you can come through and see more of a magnified employee signature on their behalf. But again, you have access to visibility to their PO number, when it actually was signed, rather, it's timestamped. The last thing I want to show everyone is some of the reporting functions that are currently available within WorkOrders. I know this again is still probably a feature that's still kind of in progress and still being developed, but currently we do have 3 reports that are somewhat beneficial to managers and I assume probably to regional directors, Russ primarily as well. So we'll kind of walk through each of those 3 reports quotes sold by date, and again, this is just filtering out the ones that have sold. So again, you have two fields, the date criteria. We can date back to January 1st of this year, and we will put today's date as the end range, and we will look for all categories. And again, we'll open this up to 50, and you can see all the quotes that have sold. If we wanted to toggle it by shop, you can see, okay, Raleigh, Atlanta, Mobile, Tampa, and so on. The nice feature, we can say, hey, how many calibration agreements have sold through work orders in the last 3 months? We can look at installation. How many of these have sold? And so again, it's just more drill down criteria. So this is one of the 3 reports that's currently up and operational. Is quotes sold by date. The second one, we'll go down to the last one here on the menu option, is quoted parts. And again, we will look at, let's just say all. So this is all of 2020, so that'll give us about 3 months of data. So we'll look this up. And again, all these columns you can kind of sort ascending or descending based on quote number, but really we want to look at part number. So you can see how many, again, let's open up the number of entries. And again, we can start to see where some of the repetitions at. 3 14605, quite a few 14617. So again, I think we can use this to our advantage in terms of seeing failure rates on some of the components. So this is a report that's at our disposal as well. And again, all this is accessible to be downloaded and exported to Microsoft Excel, and then you can kind of flex the data to your liking. Last report we'll look at is quotes by location. So again, what this does is it gives you a recap of the number of quotes being generated within each service center. So let's grab the criteria. We're going to look for all. Again, we'll have about 3 months of data, and we're going to look up. So I think currently we have, I think, the 8 shops in the system, and you can kind of see the number that have been submitted, number that have been delivered, viewed, and again, we talked earlier about the progression of the quotes as it goes from submitted, delivered, viewed, sold, and then ultimately after 30 days they typically will expire, but we do have the provision to reopen those up in the event the pricing holds constant. So again, over here in the far rightmost column, you can see the number of quotes that have been generated by each shop, and Greg Powell in Mobile, Alabama is the winner in Q1. So good stuff. This is probably a worthwhile report for many. I know Russ typically sends that out to his region as well, just kind of highlighting the activity by each service center. The last thing that I wanted to show everyone is how we go about creating service agreement quotes. It's a little unique, and it's probably one of the neatest features, but one that may be potentially viewed as a little bit tricky the first time you go after it. So again, one of the tabs that was within each of the quotes was the reoccurring services tab that we haven't really spoken about yet. So let's go ahead and create a quarterly service agreement inspection for the customer of Westrock, and we're going to price that at $825 for 2 scales. So we're going to hit the add like we would conventionally to add any new quote. Again, you can just start to type, and it's going to automatically start to filter in. The salesperson, we will make David Taylor. The location is the Eastport Road, Jacksonville. The contact, we will use myself, again, just as kind of a keyed in fictitious employee. The category, it's going to be the calibration agreement. Quarterly inspections for 2 Fairbanks Scales. And further description, inbound and outbound scales. Our terms and conditions, we have a calibration agreement terms that have been kind of combed over and aligned with what we would typically send if it was through the Excel variety. It's been transposed into work orders. The disclaimer, when in doubt, we just typically add freight and tax extra. Okay, so now the brand new quote has landed on top of the quote queue or log, if you will. We have a unique quote number 9036 that's been created. And again, you can see the description, the salesperson. Again, the progress is open. It's just kind of in draft status as of right now. Myself created it. So, and then again, the category has been filled as calibration agreement. So let's open the left little caret to kind of expand the quote and provide these additional 6 tabs. And so, as we mentioned earlier, we've yet to really delve into the reoccurring services tab. So let's click this. We are going to add calibration agreement. And again, we have a lot of descriptive information that kind of goes into what exactly the service agreement encompasses. What exactly does that include in the customer's payment to us? So again, this is some nice stuff, and all this naturally transposes over to the final quote presentation. So we decided this was an $825 inspection. We will create that. And again, you can kind of see it's come down here on this line item. So the neat feature here is once we've determined what exactly we want to have as a recurring service, in this case it's a calibration agreement, we actually wanted to determine the interval type. And in this case we decided this was quarterly. So it's going to be done in January, it's going to be done in April, it's going to be done in July, and in October. And we're going to hit save. And so the nice feature here too is, I think managers have access to, knowing their volume of contracts based on a given month. Oops, the quote accidentally collapsed. Open this thing back up. But the nice thing is typically our aim is to build the volume in off months outside of cat months. January, April, July, and October are cat months. So at least in our Savannah operation, we do everything we can to kind of build in the February, March, and so on, so we don't have such peaks and troughs throughout the calendar year. Okay, so we've determined it's quarterly. Here's the 4 months. Here's the price. We will then add some additional attachments. Again, WestRock currently is a customer, but if they weren't, we would probably give them the Fairbanks service brochure. We would tag this attachment. We would probably talk about the automated test reports, which again I think is a key differentiator in the scale business. And we will get one more of these. What customers should know. Okay. All 3 now you can see are visible. They've been tagged to this quote. All right, so we're going to go down to the totals. This is kind of our last screen before we do a final submittal to the customer. And as you notice, there's no one-time cost on this particular column. It's all been shifted to the recurring column. And again, now we have 2 options. We can review the quote in web view, which is exactly what the customer will see initially. And then in addition, we can create a PDF to kind of validate that those interval timeframes have been carried over properly. So let's review the quote. Again, this is WestRock. It was prepared by David Taylor in the upper right column. And again, you can see right here we have the quarterly recurring services January, April, July, and October, and the calibration agreement along with the descriptive information that talks about really what entails and what's inclusive of a service agreement. We can go back and we can actually create the PDF as well. Out of these additional tabs, and here it is. WestRock, David Taylor was the service technician, the calibration agreement, and again you get to see your 4 months that have been designated for the inspections. If we were to